On June 10, 2026, a Brooklyn judge sentenced 87-year-old Harvey Marcelin to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder and dismemberment of 68-year-old Susan Leyden. The sentence came just over a month after a jury found Marcelin guilty of first-degree murder, tampering with physical evidence, and concealment of a human corpse. Prosecutors said the killing happened in Marcelin's apartment in East New York, Brooklyn, in 2022. Investigators later discovered parts of Leyden's body inside and near the apartment building. Surveillance footage, physical evidence, and forensic findings became central to the case. The conviction marked Marcelin's third homicide conviction, after spending decades in prison for 2 previous killings. Susan Leyden was 68 years old. According to prosecutors, she had previously operated a jewelry business but later experienced financial hardship and became estranged from members of her family. Harvey Marcelin was a longtime New York resident with an extensive criminal history. Before the 2022 case, he had already served more than 50 years in prison for the killings of 2 women. In 1963, Marcelin was convicted of murdering his girlfriend, Jacqueline Bonds, in Manhattan. He was sentenced to life in prison and was later released on parole in 1984. The following year, in 1985, he was arrested for the killing of another girlfriend, Ana Laura Sierra. He ultimately pleaded guilty to manslaughter and served more than 3 decades in prison before being released on parole again in 2019. Investigators later determined that Marcelin and Susan Leyden had lived in the same shelter in the Bronx in 2019. The events leading to the murder investigation began on February 27, 2022. Surveillance footage captured Susan Leyden entering Marcelin's apartment building on Pennsylvania Avenue in East New York. According to prosecutors, she was never seen leaving the apartment alive. In the days that followed, authorities say evidence showed Marcelin purchasing a saw and cleaning supplies at a Home Depot in Manhattan. Additional surveillance footage later captured him moving through the neighborhood with a wheeled shopping bag. On the early morning of March 3, 2022, a man riding an e-bike discovered a wheeled shopping bag on a street corner near Marcelin's apartment building. Inside the bag was a human torso wrapped in a black plastic bag. The discovery immediately triggered a homicide investigation. Investigators worked to identify the victim and began reviewing surveillance footage from the surrounding area. According to prosecutors, video evidence showed Marcelin wheeling the same shopping bag from his apartment building before the torso was discovered. As detectives continued their investigation, they obtained and executed a search warrant for Marcelin's apartment. Inside, investigators made a series of disturbing discoveries. Police found Susan Leyden's severed head and additional body parts inside the apartment. Investigators also located blood evidence, cleaning supplies, a hammer, and packaging associated with an electric saw. The findings strengthened investigators' belief that the victim had been killed and dismembered inside the residence. On March 7, 2022, another body part was recovered. Authorities found one of Leyden's legs inside a black plastic bag near a garbage can, approximately 3 blocks from the apartment. Prosecutors later introduced additional surveillance footage showing Marcelin shopping at a discount store on a motorized scooter. According to court testimony, a black plastic bag could be seen on the scooter's seat when Marcelin briefly stood up. Investigators compared the footage with the timing and location of the recovered remains. The medical examiner conducted a forensic examination of the victim. According to prosecutors, Susan Leyden suffered blunt force trauma to the head, along with other physical injuries. The medical findings became a key part of the evidence presented during trial. As detectives continued building the case, they gathered surveillance recordings from multiple locations. Video evidence allegedly showed Marcelin purchasing a saw and cleaning supplies around the time of Leyden's disappearance. Additional footage documented his movements in the neighborhood before and after the remains were discovered.
The combination of surveillance footage, physical evidence recovered from the apartment, and forensic findings formed the foundation of the prosecution's case.
Marcelin was arrested and charged in connection with the homicide. The case eventually proceeded to trial in Brooklyn Supreme Court. Prosecutors argued that the evidence demonstrated that Susan Leyden entered Marcelin's apartment on February 27, 2022, was killed inside the residence, and that her body was subsequently dismembered. The defense challenged aspects of the prosecution's case and argued that another individual who had been present in the apartment area should also be considered. However, prosecutors maintained that the evidence overwhelmingly pointed to Marcelin. After hearing testimony and reviewing evidence, the jury began deliberations. On May 7, 2026, the jury returned guilty verdicts. Harvey Marcelin was convicted of first-degree murder, tampering with physical evidence, and concealment of a human corpse. Following the conviction, sentencing was scheduled for June 10, 2026. At the sentencing hearing, Brooklyn District Attorney Eric Gonzalez stated that the conviction ensured Marcelin would never be released again. The court imposed a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The sentence effectively guarantees that Marcelin will spend the remainder of his life in prison. The case also renewed attention on Marcelin's criminal history. His first homicide conviction dated back more than 6 decades to 1963. After being released on parole in 1984, he was convicted again in connection with the 1985 killing of Ana Laura Sierra. Following another parole release in 2019, prosecutors said he committed the murder of Susan Leyden less than 3 years later. As of June 2026, Harvey Marcelin remains incarcerated following his conviction and life without parole sentence. There are no reported future release opportunities under the sentence imposed by the court. The case is considered resolved through conviction and sentencing. Susan Leyden was last seen entering Harvey Marcelin's Brooklyn apartment on February 27, 2022. Investigators later recovered her remains inside and near the apartment, and a jury convicted Marcelin of first-degree murder, tampering with physical evidence, and concealment of a human corpse. On June 10, 2026, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. If you found this report informative, please share this video and subscribe for more true crime coverage. Harvey Marcelin is now serving a life without parole sentence for the 2022 murder and dismemberment of Susan Leyden.